It's the same every night. I soar over an azure ocean, the sun gleaming and reflecting off of the crystal waters. All is peaceful in the world. Suddenly, the water begins to mutate, as if a moldy miasma bubbles forth from the depths below. Wait, is that freaking Teal? Tendrils of fabric burst forth from the surface, ensnaring me in their clutches. The fabric is crinkly, shiny, and moves with an organic malevolence, like a nightmarish bridesmaid's dress, come alive to devour me. Slowly, steadily, I'm drawn into the depths. My sight grows dim, and the world fades to black. It was just a dream. Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and oh boy, do I have a show for you today. But first, I hope you enjoyed that short introductory video, Teal, Taffeta, and Terror. It's definitely something of a first for this channel, and I want to thank my video producer, director, and editor, who also happens to be my son. We had an absolute riot putting it together. And if you liked it, you should definitely check out his channel, Zapper, Z-A-P-P-R, on YouTube. He puts together some crazy stuff, video editing wise. All right, so as you might suspect, today's video is about Fabric's ugly teal branding color, as well as the lies perpetuated on the community and those who were wrong by said lies. I'm going to prove once and for all that the teal introduced to Power BI had nothing to do with accessibility. It was only about adopting Fabric's brand color. Now you might say, well, Greg, can it be both? Well, simply stated, no, it can't be both. And it isn't both. And again, I'm going to lay it all out in explicit detail. But first, I must come clean and admit that I have a deep-seated hatred for the color teal. I won't call this hatred irrational, because there is a reason for it. While many of the things I do may seem irrational, I assure you that each has a reason behind it. Like my intentional mispronunciation of the word parquet. You see, the problem with the word parquet is that I am entirely incapable of pronouncing the word correctly without it coming out parquet. And if you weren't a child growing up in the 70s and 80s, then perhaps you have no frame of reference for this. But for me, the vision of grown adults sitting around a kitchen table arguing with an insufferably annoying container of margarine is firmly burned into my brain. I would sit in front of the television completely enamored and internally screaming, "You fool! You are totally going to get rolled by that container of margarine." And inevitably they would. So I simply cannot say parquet without doing the voice. All right, so where does my deep-seated hatred of teal come from? Well, I've actually thought about this a lot, and I finally traced it to a single event, one of my sister's weddings. Now, let's get this up here. Now, I think that this image alone just says enough in terms of why I hate that color. But sure, there I am, and I'm sure I can see that I'm putting on a brave face here. But if my eyes weren't so squinty, and you could actually see into them, you could see my soul dying inside in this photo. So imagine if you're a young man forced into this suit with a constrictive tie and a stupid, ugly teal corsage, sitting through a longer than average mass, surrounded by way too much perfume and the annoying crinkle of taffeta bridesmaids' dresses. Right? Clearly stuff of nightmares. Not only that, but you're bored out of your mind because you have to stand around and take pictures when all you really want to do is get to the drinking. You might think that I'm too young in this picture to drink, but au contraire, my dad, God rest his soul, handed me my first beer when I was 8, and I never looked back. So long story short, I will forever associate teal with horribly tedious and fashion-challenged 80s weddings and that shiny, crinkly taffeta fabric. Now, I suppose it could have been worse. Right? Let's get this next one up here. This is my oldest sister's wedding. It looks like a rose garden, puked all over the right side of this photo. And what is with that bowl cut? My God, I look like Mob in that picture. So, I'm pretty sure we spray painted my favorite pair of sneakers for that event. I can't remember that exactly. So it could have been worse. Now, you might say, Greg, you're going to get yourself in trouble, with dissing your sister's wedding pictures like that, right? But luckily for me, my family, nobody in my family watches my channel. Plus, me being the youngest, I can pretty much get away with anything. And if you're now thinking, wow, that explains so much about you, Greg, that you're the youngest, well, you wouldn't be wrong. You honestly have no idea. All right, but I digress, right? On to the topic at hand. Microsoft's lies about this stupid teal color for Power BI or Fabric or whatever we're calling it these days. And I've made some statements out there in the community, such as, is nobody going to point out this heinous lie that exploited the physical condition of colorblind individuals as an excuse and cover story? Now, you might think that's a rather strongly worded statement, and you may wonder why I take such offense. Well, first off, let's be clear, I don't take offense. One of the many problems with me, and there are many, is that I am entirely unoffendable. Even when I stuck to my guns and called BS on this issue pre-Fabric and caught flack for it, that never offended me. After all, why would I be offended by people that were clearly wrong? Makes no sense. However, I do believe that there were people that were wronged in this whole endeavor. To point, I know of someone who I deeply respect in the community, but will remain nameless, that was clearly wronged in this whole business. This individual happened to post a rant on the whole teal color business when it was first announced in November of 2022. They subsequently then posted what was clearly a very sincere and heartfelt apology after they had been educated that it was for accessibility. They even received what I consider a rather condescending response to that apology by the individual who originally, and that person will also remain nameless, but they originally posted that the Teal introduced into Power BI was for contrast reasons related to accessibility. Total BS. Now, if you understand why I can't just let this matter go, you have to understand that when I see a person that I believe has been unfairly wronged that I care about, I simply cannot forgive and forget. I'm broken like that. It sticks in my craw. Now, to understand the degree that this affects me and the lengths that I will go to in order to right such perceived wrongs, please indulge me with one last story about my family. Now, my family, like many others, only really gets together around Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's also important to note that my oldest sister went into education, starting out as an elementary school teacher, then a principal, and eventually retired as a superintendent. While my older brother is they're just 1 year apart, and they're both like 10 years, 9 years older than me. He became a mechanical engineer and went into industry. So now, inevitably, at every family gathering, and this went on for years, there would be an exchange between my oldest sister and my brother. It basically kind of went where my brother would, in my mind, kind of demean my sister. He'd say things like, to paraphrase, like, well, in the real world, you don't have the luxury of taxpayers like me paying your salary. You actually have to be good at your job. Stuff like that, right? And now don't judge my brother too harshly, right? He's an okay guy. We've had our differences over the years. And he can definitely be an a-hole at times. But so anyway, this goes on for many years until, I eventually get into my 20s. And if you think I'm bad now, you have no idea. I consider myself mild-mannered, easygoing, and relatively mature. But that's only because I know where I started. What you see today was at least 10 times worse back in my 20s. Don't think about that too hard, because I'm sure it'd be rather scary. So anyway, one of these holidays comes to pass. It's Thanksgiving, and we're sitting around playing cards, which, to be clear, is where all of my family's conflicts come from. My family takes euchre and pinochle way too seriously and competitively. So my brother happens to be my partner, and he's now become a professor of mechanical engineering at a university. You might see where this is going. And he's giving me heck over the cards I'm playing, and he's just annoying me to death, right? And I'm in my 20s, and I have a short fuse. So I finally had enough. And I can't recall the exact specifics, but at some point I give it to him, right? I'm like, well, in the real world, you don't have the luxury of taxpayers like me paying your salary. You actually have to be good at your job. Right? I take his words and I parrot them right back in his face. So, as you might imagine, this did not sit very well with my brother. You could just see the red just like start in his neck and just like boil up through his face until it reaches to the top of his head, and he just explodes explodes, right? He comes out of his chair and he's yelling at me and pointing and cussing. And, of course, at that time, especially, man, I'm not taking that. So I jump out of my chair and I'm yelling and cussing back at him. We both get kicked out of Thanksgiving that year, right? So, so, and for the record, I've only been kicked out of family holiday gatherings. I had 3 times, over cards, of course. Oh, and I was permanently banned from Christmas, also cards. Although that was later rescinded. So when I say that my family takes cards way too seriously, I mean it. And when I say the wronging of people sticks in my craw, I also assure you that I mean that as well. All right, let's finally get to this business about teal color. As you may recall, this teal was introduced as an accent color for accessibility reasons in the Power BI desktop back in 2022. I called BS on this immediately and never relented my position on this matter. I never have. Um, and now this same teal has been revealed to be the color of Microsoft Fabric. Now, there's no question in my mind that the veracity of my position has been utterly vindicated. But, but, there may be of those of you out there who are unconvinced. So let me convince you. Now, first and foremost, there's the evidence of the actual colorblind individuals in the community saying that the teal is far worse than the yellow, right? So right off the bat. Second, it's important to understand that no color in and of itself provides greater contrast than another color. It's all about what other color or colors that color is paired with. So in this respect, green is not inherently, or teal or blue is not inherently any better in terms of contrast than yellow. Okay. And in fact, in this respect, green tends to be the number one color to avoid, followed by blue and then gray. But don't take my word for it. Right. So here's a good article. Right. It goes through different types of color blindness. Very good article. You should read it. And here it is right here. As for the green, it is the number one color among the colors to avoid for the color blind. Now it goes on, explains it, but so why is that, right? So, and it's because, right? There's another good article on the subject, and it's because if you scroll down here, you get to these 8 bad color combos to avoid. 8 of them. 6 involve green. The other 2 involve blue, right? Then there's gray is also 2, but only when paired with blue and green. And here's another very good article. Come down here, and there it is. There's the color combinations to avoid. Again, it all features green mostly, followed by blue. Right? So what is teal? Teal is literally the combination of green and blue and tends to be more green based, like the color of Microsoft Fabric. Now let's review where this accent color actually appears in Power BI. So here's an example, right? And this is one. It appears in other places as well, but here's a for example, right? So now you can just look at it, right? This compared to this, which one has more contrast? It's not this. Teal on black. It's yellow on black has more contrast. Same thing here, right? So what is this nonsense about providing better contrast, right? Makes no sense. Yeah, let me drag this over here. Now, again, why is it just the teal color or the yellow color, right? Why isn't it? Why, if they want more contrast, then why aren't these panes with the gray and less contrast, why aren't they the same as the filters pane, which has more contrast, right? Right? I mean, I understand that they want to say that the filters pane is different somehow than these panes, but there's other ways to do that, right? You could do a different icon up here, maybe a different color in the header. There's a bunch of different ways that they could get that point across, that the filters pane is kind of special compared to these panes, right? Lots of different ways to do that. So if the whole purpose is to provide more contrast, why are they myopically focused on just the yellow or just the teal? There's tons of other improvements that they could make to the product that would also provide higher contrast. Okay. So let's now tie this teal abomination to fabric, which obviously not that hard. But would it surprise you if I told you that the teal color was introduced to Power BI the same month that the private preview for Trident started? Trident being the code name for fabric. Now, what is Trident, or now Fabric, right? So it's the bundling of Power BI, Synapse, and Data Factory. The three prongs of the Trident, if you will. Oh, look, I wonder where the teal came from, right? You bundle blue together with green and you get teal. But here's the problem, right? Power BI is this yellow, right? And what you have to understand is that there's no strong brand association with the blue and the green with Data Factory and with Synapse, right? And also the technical, because blue is already associated with Word and green is already associated with Excel. There's no strong brand tie there, right? Plus, the people that use these products are fairly technical, and technical people don't really give a crap about what color their product is, right? And relatively few people use these products as compared to Power BI. So you got Power BI as this outlier out here, right? One, it's wildly popular, right? And there is a strong brand connection with the yellow color in Power BI. It's been like that since the beginning. It's been around like 8 years or so, right? There's a very strong brand connection there. There's many more people that use Power BI, and the people that use Power BI relative to Synapse and Data Factory are less technical, right? They're going to care more about this brand connection to their yellow color, right? That's why, I mean, when they introduced the teal, like part of the Power BI, community like revolted, right? All right. So you have to understand, I explained this in my other video of why Fabric exists, right? It's critically important for Microsoft that Power BI users feel immediately familiar with the new brand, right? They don't want that backlash that happened back in November, happening on May 23rd when they introduced Fabric, okay? Also, Power BI is like the least integrated of the products, right? Power BI doesn't need Synapse or Data Factory, but Data Factory and Synapse need Power BI, right? They need Power BI's, entrenched loyal user base. They need those people to adopt this new platform Fabric and adopt Synapse and adopt Data Factory, right? In order to grow the market share of these products, since they've been losing, for years in the market. So what to do? Well, since it would be too shocking and disorienting for Power BI users if their brand suddenly changed, May 23rd, it'd be better, this is what the marketing people are going to say, right? It's better to introduce the color slowly over time. So maybe 6 months. So it's in order to make those users feel embrace and be familiar with the brand, the new brand, and embrace the new brand. And otherwise, this whole bundling thing is all for naught anyway. If we don't get the Power BI users to adopt these products. All right, here's what it boils down to, people. You can believe either one of two things, right? On the one hand, you can believe that Microsoft went through an extensive exercise to determine the most accessible color for Power BI and introduced that into Power BI Desktop. And they did this exercise without considering any other improvements that could be made in this regard. They were just myopically focused on teal versus yellow. Subsequently, Microsoft decided to launch this thing called Fabric, but they needed a brand color for it. Power BI folks were like, hey, hey, we just created this god-awfully ugly teal that our extensive studies demonstrate has superior accessibility than any other color. Why not adopt that? Then Microsoft's like, yeah, sure, screw it. One color is as good as the next. Let's go with it. So you can believe that. That's option A. Or you can believe option B, right? That Microsoft doesn't do things haphazardly and is actually fairly deliberate particularly about its marketing and its branding. And they chose the color teal for Fabric months and months and months ahead of time. But they faced this dilemma of not shocking and utterly alienating its largest, most valuable target audience, and thus decided to introduce that color gradually over time so that the launch of Fabric, that user base was already familiar and accepting of the brand change. But since you can't reveal the existence of Fabric, right, you decide to virtue signal and say that the change is for accessibility reasons, even though you know full well that that is complete BS. That's option B. Now I ask you, which one sounds more likely? At the end of the day, Microsoft owes the community an apology. Not for lying, because, what do we expect? No, they owe the community, and in particular the colorblind community, an apology. They falsely virtue signaled, and that is utterly reprehensible, in my opinion. I said it before, and I'll say it again. If Microsoft had said that the color change was to help individuals in wheelchairs, there would have been a universal outrage. Universal outrage. So why is it different when they use the physical condition of the colorblind as their cover story? Why is that any different? They bald-faced lied to those individuals that they gave one iota, one crap about them. Now, I could go into the hypocrisy of this, how every Microsoft call starts with a lecture on inclusivity and diversity. That all rings utterly hollow, given what has transpired here. It's all lip service. More than anything, though, there's one particular individual at Microsoft that spread these lies and owes my friend a sincere, heartfelt, and public apology. As sincere, heartfelt, and public as an apology my friend publicly shared with the entire world when they believed that they were in the wrong. My friend was not in the wrong. The individual that posted that lie was in the wrong. Not only did that individual lie, they weren't even good at it. Here's a piece of advice. If you're going to lie, at least lie in a semi-intelligent way that actually sounds reasonable, because otherwise you look like a complete and utter moron, which you do. I personally have zero respect for liars, and even less respect for stupid liars. But that's just me. I clearly have issues. That is all for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.